Now, a couple of months ago, I made a video about fish farming and a lot of you reacted massively. Some of you asking me to go back and, try to answer more elaborate questions. But guess what? Today, that is the day that the Lord has made, and we're going to talk more about fish farming and how lucrative it is in this current year and state. But if you're new here, please do ensure you follow, you subscribe, you like, you comment, and share your views after this particular interview. Also, if you're new, my name is Dennis Duke Onyala, your host, and I am seated here at Subi Do Model Farm located in Busia district. And I've met up with a gentleman who is going to take us through fish farming. Now, this is a model farm where they have a couple of other things. They have fish farming, they have watermelon, coffee farming, cattle, goats, chickens, and so forth and so on. So please visit them if you want to learn on any of those enterprises. But for now, let's talk to this gentleman. Good morning, Sebo.
Morning, sir.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine.
Busmaningeni.
Yes, Busmaningeni.
What is that?
That is
your staple food, a posho and fish.
Yes, preferably kalu.
Interesting. Now, we're in Busia district, and Busia's staple food is busma, ningeni, that is posho, and of course fish. Now, this is Rusamia, right?
Yeah, that's Samia.
Oh, okay. You're Msamia.
Yeah.
Please introduce to your people, to our people, so that we get started.
Yeah, thank you so much. Welcome our viewers. By names, I'm called Omar Robert, fish expert here. You're welcome to Subi DHO farm, and it is a pleasure meeting you today.
It's a pleasure meeting you today. So let's talk fish farming. Why did Subi DHO model farm choose to also venture into fish farming?
Right. Given our culture here, we are so much accustomed with fish. And fish being a lucrative business, one would dearly need to venture into the aspect of fish farming.
Okay.
It is now close to a year when we're in operation, and so far things are good.
Things are good.
Right.
So right from the beginning, I want to start fish farming. Where do I start from? What is the first step for me to start fish farming?
Right, thank you. For anybody to start an enterprise of fish farming, you are required to check with an expert to help take you through a certain arrangement. One will need to assess whether your site is suitable for setting up an enterprise of fish. After you've done a site survey, you'll need to excavate the ponds. Setting up those ponds is not a matter of digging holes. You need to dig and compact simultaneously to have those soils firm. And that is what constitutes a fish pond. After you're done with the construction, you can go ahead and treat your ponds, then subsequently stock. So all you need is to carry out a site survey and ensure that whatever you're doing is sustainable. Most important is water. Among the requirements you need a stable supply of reliable water. As you've seen down there, we have water. And that is why we decided to venture into fish farming. To tap that resource and utilize it for production of fish. You also need to consider aspects of feed. That's why I told you need an expert. You need to have an enterprise budget of what you're going to do, the feeds that you require, and the size of the ponds that you've made. Are you doing fish for subsistence or commercial? So if you're going for commercial fish farming, you'll need the production units that would shoot that specific pond you're going into.
So in simple terms, you're telling me that if I don't have water on my farm or my land, I can't do fish farming?
Definitely, you need to have water.
Which type of water are we talking about? A stream, a swamp, or a borehole? Because all that is a source of water.
Now with the water sources that are very recommended, currently here what we depend on are springs. If you have underground springs, they can as well work. You need to have stream water. That is also very good. It is hard to rely on a borehole.
Why?
Because the volumes of water we require in a pond are much. And remember, these are earthen ponds. Earthen in that the ponds are dug underground, and some of that water will be lost in saturation. Remember, there is also evaporation. So when you imagine the volume of water you will require to fill a pond will become hectic if you say you're carrying water from a borehole to a pond. Alternatively, if you have a stream around, you can pump from the stream to the ponds. That is, if the gradient or terrain does not favor your ponds to align down the stream. You improvise with a solar pump and have that water filled in the pond. The aspect of feeding, currently here, we are depending on complete dietary feeds. As you saw on the label I showed you, we are using codized feeds, and these are tested feeds. However, we also improvise using our farm-made feeds here, depending on the available resources we have. That is why I shared with you the other time that we also venturing into skilling the local community here. We are planning to have tailor-made courses for people to come and practically learn
Fish farming.
fish farming on farm.
Okay.
Because when you have all these aspects and someone is doing something practically, it is far better than going to class somewhere or in a hotel.
And study, yes.
We have made sure that we procure whatever we need for that enterprise. All the inputs we need to use for fish farming are available here at farm. And the other most important aspect is water quality management. I need to take you through the treatment process after you've constructed your fish pond.
Before you even go take us to the treatment, how big should the pond be? What is the required size for a fish pond?
It depends, but as I told you, for someone venturing into commercial fish farming, I would advise a standard pond to start from 500 square meters. And
What is that in a simple layman's language of feet?
500 square meters can be 25 meters in length and width of 20 meters. Then when you compute that into feet, you will come with a clear picture.
At least, ladies and gentlemen, you can compute from meters to feet. Let's not breastfeed you guys.
Right.
It's okay.
However, I think should I take you to the...
So the pond size,
The
pond size should be 25 meter to what? To 20, you said?
To 20, depending on the measurement in length you want to make, but make sure it fits from within the 500 square meters.
So it's the 500 square meters. How long my width takes and how long my length takes is not important. But as long as I have the area as 500 square meters.
Yes, but I will also advise for one to have a pond, it should not really look square.
Okay.
It's better to have it
a rectangular form.
It
Why not
is-
squared?
A rectangular pond is easier to work with. You see, we do seining and sampling. The size of net that are always available, mended, favor a rectangular pond than a square pond.
Okay.
It is also easier and the labor you employ to do some of those activities. Then I also take you to the water exchange bit of it.
Just before we leave the pond thing, because I wanted us to move simultaneously. Does the pond have to be raised up a bit or to be on the same level, the same ground, like the same leveled ground?
You don't need to have it to the same level with the ground.
Why?
Because we need to take into account erosion.
Okay.
That's why when we are excavating those ponds, we make sure we raise the dikes. The dikes are the working surfaces. And you just don't dig and pull the soils out. We clear the ground, remove all the vegetative matter. Then we start the excavation and compaction simultaneously.
So now let's go to pond management. After you're dug and you've done all that.
So after you've constructed your fish pond, it is very essential to make sure that those ponds are treated. We have water and soil testing kits available. I'll need to determine the pH of the soil. I'll need to assess the pond bottom. A well-constructed pond should have at least a 1% bottom slope. That implies that water should be able to drain by gravity. And after you've fitted all the necessary PVCs, the piping system, I will lime that pond with the available limes depending on the status of the pond. We have various limes we use. There's calcium carbonate, we have calcium oxide, depending on how I've assessed. So after you've limed the pond, we allow it a period of not more than 2 weeks to fill the water. We shall take fertility measurements and find out whether we still need to fertilize the ponds before stocking. Fertilization is also two-way. We may think of fertilizing using organic manure and or inorganic fertilizers. But as you've rightly seen on the farm, we have a rich supply of organic manure.
Why do we need manure in a fish pond when I am aware that the manure is specifically for plants and not animals?
You're very right. However, the reason as to why we need to fertilize the ponds with manure, fish, more so tilapia is a plankton feeder, phytoplanktons. Even catfish is a plankton feeder, though it so much depends on zooplanktons. And it is this manure that will release nutrients, that these nutrients will stimulate the growth of algae, which is a phytoplankton for the tilapia to feed, and subsequently the zooplanktons for the catfish. So that is the reason as to why we do fertilize.
Okay,
interesting. The only difference is that organic fertilizers tend to take a little longer for you to realize the effect.
Okay.
That is why people sometimes opt for inorganic fertilizers such as DAP and the other varieties of fertilizers.
Okay. After we've managed our ponds, what is the next step we need to take?
After we fertilized and fill the water and assess that the water is ready for stocking, we shall go ahead and stock.
Get our fish fingers. Is it fish fingerlings?
Fish fingerlings.
Okay.
From wherever we shall.
Our young fish.
Yes. And for tilapia, I would recommend someone to stock fish in a pond, not less than 4 grams. For catfish,
per fish,
the average weight of fish, yes,
should be above 4 grams.
At least above 4 grams.
Why above 4 grams? Why is it necessary and important?
Because if you stock fish that is less than that, remember we shall have things like frogs and toads in our ponds. And these young fish tend to become prone
to these things,
to predation from those tadpoles. Toads are not tadpoles. Likewise, for catfish, I would advise you stock catfish of average weight 10 grams in a pond. However, we don't stock if you're going to do polyculture, you don't stock that fish all in the same pond. Usually, the tilapia we have, the tilapia fingerlings we have on market are always sex reversed. They apply some hormones to change the sex of these fish, purposely to regulate the prolific breeding of tilapia in a pond. And if you're going to do polyculture, that is, I'm going to mix more than one species in a pond. You'll introduce the tilapia and perhaps regulate with a few pieces of catfish.
Why do we do that?
To regulate the prolific breeding of tilapia in a fish pond.
What do you mean prolific breeding? I don't understand still.
A pond is stocked depending on its size.
So if I have this diameter, I need to have this number of fish.
Yeah, if you have an area of say 500 square meters,
yes.
And I'm going to stock tilapia fingerlings at a rate of say 3, depending on your target harvest per square meter, that means I need to keep that in that pond to keep the biomass constant. But remember, I told you that this fish is sex reversed. However, it may not be 100%. There is a possibility that some females always survive and they start breeding as soon as they reach the spawning age, which is usually about 3 months. That is when we bring in catfish to help us regulate the numbers.
So regulating the numbers means the catfish will eat the eggs.
The catfish will eat the eggs. The catfish will eat the surviving fry that will be hatched to keep the numbers constant.
Oh, okay.
Yes. However, with catfish, it is usually hard to find it spawning in a pond, though it does. And the feeding nature of catfish and feeding requirement of catfish, if not well managed, they tend to predate on themselves. That is why we do sampling and pull out all the shooters, those that appear to be bigger than the rest. The shooters may be very few and start predating on the others. That is, if it is not well fed. The protein content of the requirement of protein catfish needs is not usually the same with tilapia. And if you don't regulate the feeding regime of catfish, you're likely to have predation affecting the numbers you stocked. That is why you'll find allegations that my fish was either stolen, yet when you drain the pond, you realize that you have very few big ones and a number of some tiny ones. So those are the shooters that have been predating on the other stock to reduce the numbers.
Okay. My next question would be, how do we maintain the ponds after we've put in the fish?
Yeah, basic management of fish pond is a daily routine. You need to be smart on your record keeping. We have feeding charts, and when you're feeding fish, you don't just come, get feed and throw, then go away. It's a process. When you mismanage the feeding regime on your farm, then you're likely to have a problem with the yield. Remember, this feed is very costly, and the moment it is mismanaged, it can also accumulate and likewise spoil the water quality in your pond. So you need to manage the feeding aspect very well. As you saw, we also we improvised, we need to cover the ponds with the predator nets. As you saw, we are using twines to deter all wading birds that would swim through. We also make sure that we slash to keep the grasses short. That helps us do away with the frogs and or snakes, if possible. Keeping your ponds clean helps you in a way that you'll have eased the work of the pond attendant to enter and do whatever is supposed to do, more so on the slopes of the pond. You need to have protective gears, just like you saw one of our staff here putting on a chest wadder to enter water without fear of thinking they will encounter leeches.
Interesting. How do we feed our fish? What do we feed them on? You did talk about cow dyes products, but aren't there any other inexpensive feeding methods?
We have a number of feed suppliers in the country, but at our farm we preferred to go with cow dyes. However, we also formulate our own feeds here, depending on the available resources we have. After we've harvested maize, we keep what we call bran and bring all the other ingredients and mix those feeds on farm here. A component that we are planning to incorporate on our training manuals for farmers that will be interested in knowing how to formulate on-farm feeds for their farms. You asked about the feeds. How do we determine the feeds that we put in a pond? Fish is fed depending on the average body weight. That is multiplied by the number of fingerlings you stocked. And we have feeding charts available. This information is researched, tested, and availed to the public. However, as you follow the feeding chart, you also feed by response. Don't just come and say, I was told
Today
to put
10 kgs, that's it.
Yes, you also determine whether the fish is eating the feed that you're putting. There may be factors as to why it's not eating. However, at the end of every month, we do take samples in all those ponds you've seen, and that helps us determine progress, and we step the feed administration.
Okay.
Right.
How many times do we feed per day?
Our feeding regime is twice a day.
During which times? Morning, evening, or morning and afternoon?
That is morning and afternoon, depending on weather. But the feeding regime is twice a day.
What happens when I feed them 3 times a day? Won't they grow too fast, too quickly for me? And that is good, of course.
The aspect of growing is there, but fish needs to be fed when it's hungry. You avail feed to the fish, and fish will eat when they are hungry. The response will be very good, and that is our target. Because the moment you come and see feeds floating on water, that is an indication that I'm either mismanaging and overfeeding, and that feed may accumulate and spoil the water quality.
Ah, okay. So I need to be very, very careful with the quantity of feed I give my fish.
Right, right.
Okay, so how long does fish take to mature?
When you've fed your fish very well,
Or different species mature at different
not really.
intervals?
Not really. For the two, mostly the species we are dealing with here, research has proven that in not more than 6 months, you should have attained table size. Table size meaning at least 350 grams. That fish is ready for sale. However, with the demand available, even if it's 200 grams and there's ready market, I've seen people selling fish. It is not advisable to keep fish for a very long time because it impacts on the investment capital. Remember, the feeds, it's money we are injecting in. So you need to be very, very strict and make sure you move as planned. You need to have an investment plan on when you expect to harvest so that you move as planned.
Around the water ponds or the fish ponds, we did see some pipes. What are these pipes and what's the importance of those pipes?
Yeah, thank you. Remember, I told you that our ponds down there drain with gravity and we shall not have water in the pond. Some of them, the ones you're seeing, those are stand pipes connected to the drainage system. When we want to drain the ponds, we remove that stand pipe or tilt it to reduce water and do whatever we want to do. If we want to do total harvest, we open and all the water is drained. Then the other pipes you were seeing in the corners, diagonal to the stand pipes of the drainage, those are inlet pipes that we get water to enter the ponds and fill the pond. We also screen those pipes in case the water enters accidentally when you're not aware. The ponds cannot flood. The water will go through the screen and leave the fish in the pond to have our fish and water that we require in the pond. So the stand pipe helps us maintain a specific water column of water in the pond.
Okay. Let me take you a little back. You talked about the fingerlings, fish. I don't know, fishling, I don't
Fingerlings,
know,
the fish seed, yes.
Where do we get those young fish from? If somebody wanted to start a farm today, where does he go? In Kampala, in Busia, where? Is it available in every district?
Yeah, currently we have a number of, there are so many hatcheries. We have some in Busia. And for us, we've opted to pick the stock we are using today from Tororo.
Okay, there's a hatchery in Tororo.
Yeah, there is a fish hatchery in Tororo called Rock Springs. And these people are into commercial fish farming, both on land and in cages, Lake Victoria. And we deem their seed of quality because we've seen their products out there. So it is where we've picked our stock. And so far the stock is doing well. And I would hope that we shall also attain the same products as the ones they have.
Okay. If I wanted to start up a hatchery, is it so hard? Why don't I start off my own hatchery? Like I would do my own nursery bed for Sukuma Wiki and I don't have to go elsewhere to buy. Wouldn't I be reducing on the cost if I started my hatchery? And if I want to start, because you're an expert, why don't we have a hatchery at Subi Model Farm?
You're very right, but remember, fish is a lucrative business. And setting up a hatchery is not something you just wake up and you come up with an enterprise plan and set up one. We are in preparations to have a hatchery here on site, and I know we shall be able to achieve that. But also, when you have a hatchery, there is what we call gene duplication. And the reason we opt for some of these very commercial hatcheries, is that they do selection of their brood stock to avoid some of those small issues that would impact on the quality of seed of the fingerlings. So it is an area we're also looking to venture into, and I know we shall be there.
How many number of fish can be held in a pond of 500 square meters?
As I told you that we stock depending on the size of the pond. Normally, when you're stocking, you should take into account your target harvest.
Okay.
You want to harvest that fish at what size? So if you stocked a square meter of fish, a square meter of pond with 3 fish, that means you're targeting to harvest 350 grams. That is 3 pieces will fit in that 1 square meter. So the number of fingerlings you increase by that small square meter impacts on the size at
Of
harvest.
the fish at the end of the day.
Yes. So if you're stocking at a rate of 3 for a 500 square meter pond, I would expect you to have about 1,500 fingerlings in that pond.
About 1,500?
Yes. Implying that at harvest, you expect to have an average of 350 grams. The more you increase the stocking density, the lesser the weight at harvest.
Okay. You did mention that you need to keep your water clean. Why is your water dirty here?
It is not necessarily dirty, but that color you saw it because of the activity of another species of fish, catfish. Catfish is it's a nature of activity in the pond is what makes that water look more turbid. However, we do flush to keep the water
Regulated. I
to
also found a gentleman slashing around. I thought the grass is very important in maintaining or keeping away soil erosion. Why do we keep, slashing them off?
It's good you said you found him slashing. If it was digging, then that would be a different story. But the grass needs to be kept short
Okay.
to keep the soils intact. Preferably the one you commonly call paspalum. But at least the pond should not be bare. We need to have grass to hold the soils from eroding into the pond.
Okay. In an acre, say for example, I have an acre, because we're looking at people who have small land, chunks of land or small pieces of land. I have an acre. How many ponds can go there of 500 square meters?
An acre, roughly, I estimate it at 4,000, about 4,040 square meters. And if you want 500 square meter ponds, about 4 of them, not 4, about 8.
Yes, 8.
About 8. But remember, we shall have to apportion the space for the dikes, the working surface, and the slopes. So we may find that it reduces in there.
Okay.
But at least around that, you can have those ponds.
And how much are we looking at in terms of investment? Do you have a figure that if I wanted to start a fish farm of 1 acre, those about 6 to 7 ponds, this is how much of money I should have?
Actually, an enterprise budget of 1 acre establishment, I would recommend you have about 24 million.
Okay.
Depending on...
What is this 24 million going to do? I am assuming we have land already.
That 24 million is going into capital investments like construction of the ponds itself. A pond is not something you just come and dig. I told you construct it and you have to compact those soils. on that very money, I'm estimating the feeds you'll need for one production cycle. And
One production cycle, that's like 6 to 8 months.
yes. So for an enterprise budget of a year, then I'll need to double that to about 48 million shillings.
Okay.
Those are about 2 production cycles.
Okay.
And I've also accounted for the seed, the fingerlings you'll have stocked, plus the labor.
And if I put in 48 million Uganda shillings, how much am I expecting within those 2 production cycles?
For the first production cycle, by virtue of my experience, you'll have at least 5.3 million for the first production cycle. And an annual enterprise budget will amount to about 11 million shillings.
That's the return on investment.
That is the return
I've
on
invested
investment.
58 million. I've harvested 11 million. Why is the math not mathing?
Now, you'll remember the ponds are still there. For all the other production cycles, it is just improvement and some small renovations. And also, there are variable costs, the feeds that will keep reducing. But the capital investment of the pond is still there.
So in simple terms, you're telling me that this money will not come out in 1 year.
You can.
But as I produce different cycles, I keep bringing back my money.
Yeah.
And I think in one of your in your addings, I don't know why we have to have 48 million when the 24 that we started with made all the other ponds. I thought maybe it reduces, it doesn't double.
Yeah, actually, it would reduce. But you say sometimes people will ask you to prepare an investment plan that is annual. Remember, they have not started. So that is why you have always tried to maintain that figure. But ideally, the 24 works, as you said.
Okay.
And you go on the next production cycle, you reduce
on the cost that
cost
would have
that,
been already covered this side.
Good.
Okay. I just needed that to be very, very clear, ladies and gentlemen. There is also a question that I've always wanted to ask. What happens during dry season when the sun is scorchingly hot, like it is scorching on my head right now, and we are assuming it's scorching direct into the water? Doesn't the heat increase, the temperatures of the water increase? And how does that affect our fish? Because we do understand fish survives only in cold places, to be specific, in water.
Oh, thank you. One thing you have to know, our viewers, that fish is not a cold-blooded animal. Fish regulates its body temperature with the environment. And that is the reason we feed fish when the sunshine is out. And when you take temperature readings of that water, is not zero. Fish survives best at degrees of about 25 Celsius. So there is no worry that the scorching sun will affect that fish. However, when you have a small water column in the pond, that's when you start having issues. But as you rightly saw down there, our ponds are deep enough and the water column supports the temperature regulation, that is thermal regulation of fish survival. So there is no need for that worry.
As we wind up, briefly tell people why they should invest in fish farming.
Our viewers, I for one am a farmer, a fish farmer, and I don't regret joining the enterprise. Fish has never lost demand, and the return on investment is just good. The problem is management. The moment you mismanage the management, then you'll have issues with production. Maximize management, you'll have better yields. all I would advise, you may start small if the resources are not that enough. But at the end, you'll pick and improve on wherever you deem and fit, consult, then all will move on well.
Perfect. Thank you so much for giving us this time. We've
Welcome.
been speaking to one of our experts in fish farming here at Suvi DHOO Model Farm, located in Busia district, slightly about 3 kilometers away from Namaingo district as you're heading to Busia district. Ladies and gentlemen, come to this particular farm and learn a lot about fish farming. Not just fish farming, there is coffee farming, there is watermelon, there is cow, there is cattle, there is fish farm, there is chicken farming, there is goat farming, there is maize farming, and then a lot more other products right here, ladies and gentlemen. If you're new again, please ensure you subscribe. Follow me on different social media platforms at Dennis Duke UG. Until then, it's a goodbye from us. We love you.